Something important is happening in Iran, and it's bigger than a single protest, a single headline, or a single moment. What we're seeing today is the buildup of pressure: political pressure, economic pressure, social pressure, and when these forces collide, they don't just affect one country, they ripple outward. Welcome to New Angle Perspectives, a channel where we step back from breaking news and ask a deeper question. Why does this matter, and what comes next? Today, we're breaking down 5 warning signals emerging from Iran. These signals don't predict collapse, and they don't offer easy answers, but together they reveal a system under serious strain and why the world is paying close attention. The first warning signal is the scale and spread of protests across Iran. These demonstrations are not limited to one city, one group, or one political faction. They have appeared in multiple regions and involve people from different backgrounds. That matters because isolated protests are easier for governments to contain. Widespread participation is not. We should be careful here. When dissatisfaction becomes national rather than local, the pressure on leadership increases. Protests alone do not determine outcomes, but sustained, nationwide unrest changes the calculus for any state. What makes the current protest cycle especially significant is not only where it is happening, but how it is happening. The protests are decentralized, leaderless, and often organized informally. This makes them harder to disrupt through arrests or negotiations. There is no single figure to co-opt, silence, or remove. Historically, political systems struggle more with movements that lack a clear hierarchy, because such movements can reappear even after temporary suppression. This creates a long-term pressure dynamic rather than a short-term crisis. The second signal is the growing difficulty of controlling information. Authorities have relied on internet shutdowns, monitoring, and restrictions to manage public messaging. But in today's connected world, these tools are becoming less effective. Every blackout draws international attention. Every restriction raises questions. Instead of calming tensions, information control now often magnifies them. This shift matters. When a government struggles to shape its own narrative, it loses a key source of authority. Information control once worked by isolating events. Today, isolation is nearly impossible. Even partial connectivity allows images, videos, and personal accounts to circulate globally within minutes. As a result, internal unrest quickly becomes an international issue, inviting diplomatic pressure, media scrutiny, and external political responses that further constrain state options. The third signal is economic, and it touches nearly everyone. Inflation, currency weakness, and long-term sanctions have made everyday life more difficult. For many people, uncertainty is constant. Prices rise, savings lose value, and planning for the future becomes harder. Economic pressure alone doesn't create unrest, but it makes every other problem feel heavier. When people feel that effort no longer leads to stability, patience wears thin. Economic stress also limits the state's flexibility. Governments under financial pressure have fewer resources to stabilize society through subsidies, employment programs, or public investment. Over time, economic hardship reshapes expectations. Citizens begin to adjust not only their spending, but their hopes for long-term security, which alters the social contract itself. Before we continue, a quick note: if you're finding this kind of analysis useful, if you value context over headlines and want more deep dives into global events, consider subscribing to the channel. At New Angle Perspectives, this is exactly the kind of conversation we focus on. The fourth signal lies within the state's own response: the growing reliance on security measures to maintain order. Security forces remain active and organized, but their frequent deployment suggests that stability now requires constant enforcement. This approach can work in the short term. Over time, however, it becomes costly financially, politically, and socially. When maintaining order requires increasing effort, it signals strain beneath the surface. Sustained reliance on enforcement creates a cycle in which more resources are needed just to preserve the same level of control. This can crowd out investment in governance, reform, or economic recovery. While this does not mean immediate breakdown, it does indicate a system operating in maintenance mode rather than renewal mode. The fifth warning signal comes from outside Iran. Iran plays a critical role in regional security, energy markets, and global politics. That means internal instability never stays internal. Sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and strategic calculations by other countries add another layer of stress. At the same time, global powers are watching carefully, trying to assess risks and protect their interests. Iran is not operating in isolation. Its internal pressures are embedded within a wider global system. External pressure interacts with internal strain in complex ways. It can deter escalation, but it can also harden positions and reduce room for compromise. This interaction increases uncertainty for all actors involved. What these signals mean together. Individually, none of these signals tells the whole story. Together, they point to a system under long-term pressure, a system facing fewer easy choices. Reform carries risks, force carries risks, delay carries risks. This is not a game of collapse versus survival. It is a question of sustainability, how long a system can absorb pressure without meaningful adaptation. In strategic terms, this is a narrowing decision space. Each option available to leadership carries higher costs than in the past, and time itself becomes a constraint rather than a solution. What this means for people. At the center of all this are ordinary Iranians. It's important to remember that behind every signal, protest, economic hardship, and digital blackout, there are individuals navigating uncertainty, dignity, and daily survival. Structural analysis must never lose sight of human cost. The long-term trajectory of Iran will shape lives, not just strategies. For many, the challenge is not ideology but predictability, the ability to plan, work, and live without constant disruption. This human dimension is often lost in geopolitical debates, but it is central to long-term outcomes. Why this matters beyond Iran. Iran's situation matters because it tests broader ideas about governance, stability, and global order. How pressure is managed or ignored affects energy markets, regional alliances, and international norms. If there is a strategic lesson here, it is this. Systems under sustained strain rarely fail suddenly. They weaken gradually, unevenly, and visibly if we are paying attention. For the international community, the question is not prediction, but preparedness, understanding how prolonged stress can reshape regional and global dynamics over time. Understanding these warning signals doesn't tell us exactly what will happen next, but it helps us understand why the situation in Iran matters, not just for Iranians, but for the wider world. That's what we aim to do here at New Angle Perspectives. Look beyond the surface and focus on long-term consequences. Thanks for watching.